The stars were burning. Admiral Yuna stood on the bridge of her flagship and watched her fleet die. 12 ships had entered the battle above Terrace 4. Now only 3 remained, and they were running away. She had never seen anything like the Krath. Nobody in the Valori Confederacy had. For 3,000 years, her people had maintained peace across the Andromeda sector. They traded with other species. They built beautiful cities on 100 worlds. They created art and music and technology that made life comfortable and safe. They had forgotten how to fight. The Krath had not forgotten. They were insects, each one standing 3 meters tall with black armor covering their bodies. They moved in swarms of millions. They did not negotiate. They did not trade. They simply arrived at a planet, killed everything that lived there, and harvested the bodies for food. Why? UNA watched the last images from Terrace 4 before the cameras went dark. She saw families running through streets. She saw children crying for their parents. She saw the Krath drones dropping from the sky like a black rain. Then she saw nothing at all. Admiral, her second officer, said quietly, "We have received orders from the High Council. We are to return to the homeworld immediately." Yuna nodded slowly. Her hands were shaking. She had commanded ships for 40 years. She had never lost a battle before today. She had never really fought a battle before today. The Confederacy's enemies had always been small problems, easily solved with superior technology and careful diplomacy. The Krath could not be solved. They could only be survived. The journey to the Valori homeworld took 6 days. During that time, Yuna received reports from across the sector. The Krath had attacked 14 systems. They had destroyed 8 colony worlds. The death count was already in the billions and growing every hour. When her ship finally landed at the capital city, she was escorted directly to the council chamber. It was a massive circular room with seats arranged in rings around a central platform. Representatives from all 12 species of the Confederacy were present. Some were crying. Some were arguing. Most were simply sitting in shocked silence. Elder Soman was the oldest member of the council. He was a Valori like Yuna, but his skin had turned gray with age, and his eyes held the weight of 200 years of memories. He raised his hand, and the chamber fell quiet. "We have gathered today to discuss our survival," Salman said. His voice was soft, but carried to every corner of the room. "The Krath Dominion has declared no demands. They have offered no terms. They do not want our resources or our territory. They want our flesh." A representative from the Torani species stood up. He was a tall creature with blue scales and 4 arms. "Then we must fight." He shouted, "We must build weapons. We must train soldiers." "With what time?" another representative asked. She was from the Melikai, a species that resembled floating jellyfish. "The Krath move faster than we can respond. By the time we build a proper military, half the sector will be dead." "Then we surrender," a third voice suggested. "Perhaps if we offer them some worlds, they will leave the others alone." Salman shook his head. "The Krath do not accept surrender. Every species that has tried to negotiate with them has been eaten. They see us as food, nothing more." The chamber erupted into chaos. Everyone was talking at once. Some demanded immediate action. Others demanded more discussion. A few simply wept and asked why this was happening to them. Why UNA stood in the corner and watched it all. She felt empty inside. She had dedicated her entire life to protecting the Confederacy. And now she understood that the Confederacy had never truly needed protection. They had been lucky. They had lived in a quiet corner of the galaxy where nothing dangerous had found them. Until now, Salman raised his hand again. The noise slowly died down. "There is one option we have never considered," he said. The words came out slowly, as if each one caused him pain. "It is forbidden. It is dangerous. It may destroy us, even if it saves us. But I believe we have no other choice." He paused and looked around the room. Every eye was on him. "Voltomega," Soman said. "The humans." The reaction was immediate. Several representatives gasped. Others made religious signs to ward off evil. The Melikai representative actually floated backward, as if the word itself might hurt her. Yuna had heard stories about humans. Everyone had. They were told to children to frighten them into behaving. They were discussed in military academies as examples of what civilized species should never become. They were the reason Vault Omega had been built in the first place, 500 years ago. The Confederacy had discovered a small blue planet called Earth. The inhabitants were still primitive by galactic standards. They had only recently learned to split atoms and send crude rockets into space. First contact should have been simple. It was not simple. The humans were violent beyond anything the Confederacy had ever encountered. They did not just fight other species. They fought each other, constantly. They had weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They had almost used them several times. They killed each other over lines drawn on maps. They killed each other over different ideas about invisible gods. They killed each other over the color of their skin, and yet they did not die. They kept growing. They kept advancing. They turned their violence into progress, building new technologies at an impossible speed. In less than a century, they went from simple flying machines to walking on their own moon. The Confederacy had faced a difficult choice. Destroying the humans seemed wrong. They were intelligent beings, after all, with art and music and love and families. But leaving them alone seemed dangerous. What would happen when they developed faster than light travel? What would happen when they spread across the galaxy? In the end, a deal was made. The humans were told the truth about the universe. They were offered advanced technology and a place among the stars. In exchange, selected human soldiers would enter cryogenic sleep in a secret location. They would be the Confederacy's emergency defense force, to be awakened only if everything else failed. For 500 years, the humans had slept. For 500 years, the Confederacy had hoped they would never need them. Hope had run out. The humans are monsters, the Tyranny representative said. They will not stop with the Krath. They will turn on us next. Perhaps Salman admitted, but the Kraths are eating us now. The humans are only a possibility. I would rather face a future problem than die today. The vote was held. It was close. In the end, Vault Omega was approved by a margin of only 3 votes. Admiral Yuna was given command of the mission. As she left the chamber, Salman caught her arm. "Be careful," the old man whispered. "The records say that humans cannot be controlled. They can only be aimed. Make sure you aim them at the right enemy." Yuna nodded. She did not know what she would find at Vault Omega. She did not know if the humans would help them or destroy them. She only knew that her people were out of options. Captain Junho had never traveled to the dead star systems before. Nobody had. These were places where suns had died millions of years ago, leaving nothing but cold rocks floating in eternal darkness. There was no reason to visit them. There was nothing there, except Vault Omega. His ship was small, only carrying a crew of 20. Admiral Yuna had given him the mission personally. She had looked at him with tired eyes and said only 4 words. "Bring them back alive." Junho had wanted to ask questions. He had wanted to know more about these humans that everyone seemed so afraid of. But Yuna had already turned away, and he understood that some questions were better left unasked. The journey took 8 days. During that time, Junho studied every record about humans that he could find. Most of the files were classified, but his mission authorization gave him access to things that had been hidden for centuries. What? He read disturbed him. Humans were called persistence predators. This meant that they did not chase their prey quickly like most hunters. Instead, they followed their targets for hours or even days, never stopping, never resting, until their prey collapsed from exhaustion. They could walk for distances that would kill most species. They could survive injuries that should have been fatal. Their bodies healed themselves at remarkable speeds, but their physical abilities were not the most. Frightening thing about them, humans bonded emotionally with everything. They kept other animals as companions and loved them like family members. They gave names to their weapons and talked to them during battle. They formed connections with their enemies and sometimes refused to kill them. They cried when strangers died and laughed in the face of their own death. They were completely unpredictable. One record described a human soldier who had been captured by an enemy force. The enemy had tortured him for information. He had refused to speak. When rescue finally came, the human did not thank his saviors. Instead, he asked about the enemy soldier who had brought him water once during his imprisonment. He wanted to make sure that soldier survived. GUNHO did not understand this. How could someone care about their torturer? How could someone form a connection with an enemy? He was still thinking about this when his ship arrived at Vault Omega. The station was enormous. It hung in space near the remains of a dead star, completely invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Its surface was dark and cold. No lights, no signals. It looked abandoned. Junho's crew docked carefully. The airlock opened with a hiss of ancient air. Inside, everything was covered in dust. Footsteps echoed through empty hallways that had not heard sound in 5 centuries. "Captain," one of his crew members said nervously, "are you sure this place is still operational?" Before Junho could answer, lights flickered on around them. A voice filled the corridor, deep and artificial. "Welcome to Vault Omega. I am Guardian, the station's artificial intelligence. I have been waiting for someone to come. Please proceed to the central chamber for authorization." Junho followed the lights. They led him deeper into the station, past rooms filled with equipment he did not recognize, past sealed doors that his scanner said contained biological material. Finally, he reached a massive circular room. What he saw made him stop breathing. Rows upon rows of glass tubes stretched into the darkness. Thousands of them. Inside each tube, a human floated in blue liquid, eyes closed, bodies perfectly still. They looked small. Their skin was soft, without scales or armor. Their hands had 5 fingers each, with no claws. Their faces looked peaceful, almost childlike. These were the monsters that the galaxy feared. "There are 5,000 human soldiers in this chamber," Guardian said. "Each one was selected for their combat abilities and psychological resilience. They have been in cryogenic sleep for 512 years. Their bodies are healthy. Their minds are intact. They are ready." Junho walked slowly between the rows. He stopped in front of one tube and looked at the human inside. It was a female with dark hair and a small scar above her left eye. According to the label on her tube, her name was Hannah. Her rank was sergeant. Her age at the time of freezing was 32. She looked so ordinary, so fragile. "Guardian," Junho said. "What happens when we wake them up?" "Awakening Protocol Sigma will revive all 5,000 soldiers simultaneously. The process takes approximately 4 hours. Once complete, the humans will be fully operational and ready for combat deployment. Can we control them?" There was a pause. When Guardian spoke again, the artificial voice seemed almost hesitant. "No, humans cannot be controlled. They will follow orders if they agree with those orders. They will fight enemies if they believe those enemies deserve to be fought. But they cannot be forced. They cannot be programmed. They make their own choices." Junho felt cold. "Then how do we make sure they fight the Krath and not us?" "You give them a reason to care about you," Guardian said. "Humans are driven by emotion more than logic. If they see you as friends, they will die to protect you. If they see you as enemies, nothing will stop them from destroying you. The choice is theirs to make." Junho stood in silence for a long time. He thought about Terrace 4 and the billions who had died there. He thought about the Krath swarms spreading across the sector. He thought about Admiral Yuna's tired eyes and Elder Summon's warning. They can only be aimed. He took a deep breath. "Guardian, begin awakening Protocol Sigma. Full authorization." "All 5,000 soldiers." "Confirmed." "Authorization accepted." "Awakening in progress." The room hummed with energy. Lights changed from blue to gold. The liquid in the tubes began to drain slowly. On a screen nearby, Junho watched vital signs appear. Heartbeats, brain activity, breathing. The humans were waking up. Junho watched the tube in front of him. Sergeant Hannah's eyes moved beneath her closed lids. Her fingers twitched. Color returned to her skin. For a moment, nothing else happened. Then her eyes opened. They were dark brown, almost black, and they focused on Junho immediately. There was no confusion in them. There was no fear. Only a sharp intelligence that seemed to look straight through him. The tube hissed open. Hannah stepped out, naked and dripping with blue liquid. She did not seem bothered by this. She stretched her arms, cracked her neck, and looked around the room at the other tubes opening around her. Then she looked back at Junho. "You woke us up," she said. Her voice was calm, almost friendly. "That means something bad is happening. That means you ran out of options." Junho nodded slowly. "The Krath Dominion is invading. They have killed billions already. We cannot stop them." Hannah smiled. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not a gentle one either. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "Tell me everything about these Kraths," she said. "Tell me how they fight. Tell me what they fear. Tell me where they live." She paused and looked at the thousands of other humans now climbing out of their tubes around them. "Then stand back and let us work." The next 3 days were the strangest of Captain Junho's life. 5,000. Human soldiers now filled Vault Omega. They moved through the station like they owned it, opening doors that had been sealed for centuries, taking apart equipment to see how it worked, and talking constantly in their strange language full of jokes and references that Junho did not understand. They did not rest. Not really. Some of them slept in short bursts of 2 or 3 hours, but most of them simply kept working. They ate massive amounts of food, far more than any Valorite would need. They exercised in groups, running through the corridors and lifting heavy objects. They sang songs while they worked. Loud and rhythmic songs about war and death and love and home. Junho found himself watching Sergeant Hannah more than anyone else. She had quickly emerged as one of the leaders, organizing the other soldiers and making decisions without waiting for permission. She was smaller than most of the human males, but nobody seemed to question her authority. When she spoke, everyone listened. She had spent the first day studying everything the Valori knew about the Krath. She had asked hundreds of questions. How did they communicate? What were their ships made of? How did their bodies work? What temperature did they prefer? Did they have individual personalities, or did they share a hive mind? When Junho admitted that the Valore had never studied the Krath closely because they had never expected to fight them, Hannah had laughed. "You really don't know how to have enemies, do you?" she said. It was not an insult. She sounded almost impressed. "You've built a civilization based on everyone getting along. That's actually beautiful. Stupid, but beautiful." Now, on the 3rd day, the humans had transformed part of the station into something they called a war room. Numbers and calculations filled multiple screens. Small figures representing ships moved across a central table as the humans discussed tactics. Junho stood in the corner with one of his crew members, a young engineer named Minji. She was watching the humans with wide eyes. "They really enjoy this," she whispered to Junho. "Look at them. They're planning to kill things, and they're smiling." Junho nodded. It was disturbing. The humans treated war like a game, like a puzzle to be solved. They argued over the best ways to destroy Krath swarms with the same energy that Valorite children used when discussing their favorite games. A young human male walked over to them. He had a friendly face and wore a white armband that marked him as a medic. According to his uniform, his name was Tien. "You look scared," Tien said to Minji. His accent was thick, but his words were clear. "Don't worry. We're not going to hurt you." Minji shifted uncomfortably. "I know. It's just ... How can you be so calm about all of this? You've been asleep for 500 years? Everything you knew is gone. And now you're going to war against creatures you've never seen." Tien thought about this for a moment. Then he shrugged. "Humans have a saying," he said. "The only way out is through. We can't go back to Earth. That world doesn't exist anymore. We can't pretend the Krath aren't coming. So we go forward. We deal with what's in front of us. And right now, what's in front of us is a fight." "But aren't you afraid?" Minji asked. "Of course we're afraid." Tien smiled gently. "Fear is normal. Fear is useful. It keeps you sharp, keeps you careful. But fear doesn't stop bullets. Fear doesn't save lives. So we feel the fear, and then we do the thing anyway. He patted Minji's shoulder in a gesture that seemed strange to her but also strangely comforting. That's the human secret, he said. We're not brave because we don't feel fear. We're brave because we've learned that fear is not the boss of us. Across the room, Sergeant Hannah called for attention. The noise died down immediately. Listen up, she said. I've analyzed everything we know about the Krath. Here's the situation. She pointed to the map behind her. The Krath are strong. They have numbers we can't match. Their ships are fast, and their soldiers are tough. In a straight fight, 5,000 of us against their millions, we lose. Nobody seemed upset by this news. The humans just nodded and waited. But the Krath have weaknesses, Hannah continued. They operate on a hive structure. Individual drones are stupid. They follow orders from their queens. Kill the queen, and the drones become confused and uncoordinated. Their armor is strong against energy weapons, but weak against physical force. They communicate using chemical signals that can be disrupted. And most importantly, they have never faced anything like us. Oh my, she smiled that sharp smile again. The Krath have conquered 40 star systems. Every species they've fought has responded the same way. Defend, retreat, negotiate. Nobody has ever attacked them. Nobody has ever hunted them. Nobody has ever made them feel like prey. She looked around the room at her soldiers. We're going to change that, the humans cheered. It was a raw sound, full of energy and hunger. Junho felt something he had not felt in weeks. Hope. Terrifying, confusing hope. The operation will be called Operation Homecoming, Hannah announced. Because we don't have a home anymore, so we're going to make one. Right here, in this galaxy. With these people who woke us up. She looked at Junho directly. Captain, I need to ask you something. My people are ready to fight. We're ready to die if necessary. But we need to know that this isn't just about survival. We need to know that we're protecting something worth protecting. So tell me about your people. Tell me why we should care. Junho was not prepared for this question. He stood in silence for a moment, thinking, then he spoke. My people are not warriors, he said slowly. We build things. We grow things. We make music that can make strangers cry. We have families that stretch across star systems. We have children who have never seen violence and elders who have never known fear. He paused. We are weak. We know this now. But weakness is not the same as worthlessness. We did not forget how to fight because we are stupid. We forgot because we built a world where fighting was not necessary. We believed that kindness could be stronger than cruelty. We were wrong. But I do not think we were entirely wrong. The room was silent. Hannah studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. That's a good answer, she said. You're worth protecting. She turned back to her soldiers. You're the captain? These people built a civilization based on kindness. The Krath want to eat them. I don't know about you, but that makes me angry. Humans growled in agreement. Get ready, Hannah said. We deploy in 48 hours. And when we're done, the Krath are going to learn what happens when they pick a fight with the wrong galaxy. The room exploded into activity. Humans began gathering weapons, checking equipment, and saying quiet words to each other. Some of them touched hands. Some of them hugged. They were preparing to die, and they were doing it together. Junho watched them and wondered what his people had truly released. The planet Neva 7 was dying. 10 million valor. Civilians huddled in underground shelters while the Krath Third Swarm fleet covered the sky above them. The insects had already begun landing their harvesting ships. In a few hours, they would start collecting bodies. The Valori Defense Force had retreated 2 days ago. There was nothing left to defend with. The planet had been written off as lost. The civilians had been told to make peace with their gods. Then 3 small ships appeared in orbit. Admiral Yuna watched from her command station 100 light-years away. Long-range sensors showed the human dropships descending through the atmosphere like falling stars. They were heading straight for the largest concentration of Krath forces. They're outnumbered 1,000 to 1, her second officer said quietly. This is suicide. Yuna did not respond. She just watched the dropships landed in the middle of a Krath army. For a moment, nothing happened. The Krath drones turned toward the ships, their antennae twitching in confusion. They had never seen these vessels before. They did not recognize the threat. Then the doors opened, and the humans came out. What happened next would be recorded by every surveillance drone on the planet. It would be studied in military academies for generations. It would become legend. 500 human soldiers charged directly into 50,000 Krath drones. They did not form defensive lines. They did not wait for backup. They simply attacked. Sergeant Hannah led the first wave. She carried a heavy rifle in one hand and a blade in the other. She was screaming something in her language, a battle cry that seemed to shake the air itself. Behind her, her soldiers spread out in practiced patterns, each one covering the other. The Krath had never experienced anything like this. Every species they had conquered fought the same way. Stand still. Shoot from far away. Retreat when the numbers grew too large. The humans did none of these things. They ran toward the enemy. They closed the distance. They fought at arm's length. Lieutenant Doyon was the first human to fall. A Krath blade caught his left arm and cut it clean off. Blood sprayed across the dirt. Any Velor soldier would have collapsed from shock. Any Velori soldier would have screamed for medical help. Doyon picked up his rifle with his remaining hand and kept firing. "Is that all you've got?" He shouted at the Krath surrounding him. My grandmother hit harder than that. The Krath drones hesitated. They had seen prey fight before. They had seen prey die before, but they had never seen prey laugh at death. They had never seen prey refuse to act like prey. Corporal Somi fought her way through a wall of Krath bodies to reach Doyon. She was carrying 2 wounded soldiers on her back, one under each arm. Somehow, she was still laying down covering fire with a pistol held in her teeth. "Medic." She screamed through clenched jaws. "Officer down." Taiyun appeared from somewhere, his white armband now red with blood. He grabbed Doyon and began treating the wound immediately, sealing the stump with medical foam while enemies raged around them. Doyon was still shooting the entire time. "You need to stop moving," Taiyun said. "You need to work faster," Doyon replied. In the center of the battlefield, Hannah had found what she was looking for. The Krath Hive commander stood on a raised platform, directing its drones with chemical signals. It was massive, 3 times the size of a normal Krath. With armor that gleamed like black metal, Hannah walked toward it. The drones tried to stop her. She killed them without slowing down. Her rifle ran empty, so she drew her blade. She was wounded in a dozen places. Blood ran down her face and arms. She did not stop. The Hive commander made a sound that might have been surprise. It had never seen a single enemy approach it before. It had never had to fight personally. It raised its massive claws and struck at Hannah with enough force to crush stone. She dodged, barely the claw passed close enough to cut her cheek. Then she climbed onto the commander's arm and started running up its body. The commander thrashed, trying to shake her off. It smashed its own arm against the ground. It clawed at its own chest. Nothing worked. Hannah climbed higher and higher until she reached the commander's head. She looked into its compound eyes. "You made a mistake," she said. "You came to the wrong galaxy." Then she drove her blade through the commander's brain. The effect was immediate. Across the battlefield, Krath drones stopped moving. Their chemical signals had been cut off. Without their commander, they became nothing more than large insects. Following basic instincts, instead of coordinated tactics, the humans did not give them time to recover. The battle lasted 6 more hours. When it was over, the 3rd swarm fleet was destroyed. 50,000 Krath drones lay dead on the ground. The harvesting ships had been captured or burned. The humans had lost 43 soldiers. 43 out of 500. Admiral Yuna watched the final reports come in. Her hands were trembling again, but not from fear this time. "Impossible," her second officer whispered. "That's impossible." Yuna shook her head slowly. "No, it's just humans." On the surface of Neva 7, Hannah stood among the bodies. She was covered in blood, both red and black. Her soldiers gathered around her, those who could still walk helping those who could not. Nobody was celebrating. They had won, but winning did not feel like joy. It felt like exhaustion and grief and the heavy knowledge that this was only the beginning. Taeyeon approached Hannah carefully. "Sergeant, are you okay?" Hannah looked at him. Her eyes were distant. "I killed the commander," she said. "It looked at me before it died. I think it was confused. I think it didn't understand why we were doing this. Why we were fighting so hard for people who weren't even our own species. What did you feel?" Taeyeon asked. Hannah thought for a long moment. "Nothing," she said finally. "I felt nothing for the commander, but I felt everything for them." She gestured toward the distant underground shelters where 10 million Valori were still hiding. Still alive? Still waiting to learn that they would survive another day? "That's why we fight," she said. "Not because we love war, but because we love the people that war would destroy." Above them, the sky began to clear. The Krath ships were gone. The sun was setting, painting the clouds in shades of orange and gold. Neva 7 had been saved, but the war was far from over. The war lasted 11 months. It should have lasted decades. The Krath Dominion controlled 40 star systems. They had billions of soldiers. Their swarm fleets had never known defeat, but they had never faced humans before. After Neva 7, more humans were awakened from Vault Omega. 20,000 soldiers now moved across the sector, striking Krath positions without warning, disappearing before reinforcements could arrive, and teaching Valori troops how to fight alongside them. The humans did not fight like an army. They fought like a force of nature. They attacked from directions the Krath did not expect. They used tactics that seemed insane until they worked. They adapted to every challenge faster than should have been possible. Captain Junho traveled with the human forces for most of the war. He saw things that would stay with him forever. He saw a human pilot crash his damaged ship directly into Krath command station, destroying it and himself at the same time. The pilot's last words over the radio were, "Tell my mother I love her." He saw human medics run into active battlefields to save wounded Valori soldiers. Ignoring the fire around them, he saw Sergeant Hannah stand alone against a Krath charge, buying time for civilians to escape, taking wound after wound but refusing to fall until the last transport was safely away. He saw humans cry over dead friends, then dry their eyes and keep fighting, and he saw something else too. He saw humans building things, teaching things, making friends with species they had never met before. Private Taeyeon became close with the Velour engineer Minji. They spent long nights talking about their different worlds, sharing stories and jokes and memories. When Taeyeon was wounded badly in battle, Minji stayed by his bed for 3 days until he recovered. When he woke up, the first thing he asked about was whether she had eaten. "You almost died," Minji told him. "And you're asking about my meals?" Taeyeon smiled weakly. "Dying would have been easy. Living means taking care of the people around you. That's the hard part." The final battle took place above the Krath homeworld. The human fleet, now supported by rebuilt Valori forces, surrounded the planet and demanded surrender. The Krath Empress refused. She sent her last army to destroy the invaders. It was not enough. Sergeant Hannah led the ground assault personally. She had been wounded 17 times during the war. She had lost count of how many friends she had buried. She was tired in ways that went deeper than her body, but she finished what she started. The battle was brutal and short. Human soldiers fought through the Empress's palace, room by room, until they reached the throne chamber. Hannah entered alone. The Empress was enormous, the largest Krath Junho had ever seen. She sat on a throne made of bones, surrounded by her last guards. When she saw Hannah, she made a sound that might have been laughter. "One small creature," the Empress said through a translation device. "You think one small creature can end an empire?" Hannah did not answer with words. She raised her weapon. The guards attacked. Hannah killed them all. It took less than a minute. Then she stood before the Empress. "Your empire is already ended," Hannah said. "Your fleets are destroyed. Your armies are scattered. Your people will survive only if you surrender now." The Empress stared at her with compound eyes that showed no emotion. "Why?" the Empress asked. Why do you fight so hard for species that are not your own? What do you gain from this war? Hannah thought about the question. She thought about Earth, a planet she would never see again. She thought about the Velour, who had woken her from a 500-year sleep. She thought about Minji and Junho and all the strange, gentle, foolish aliens who had built a civilization on kindness and almost lost it to monsters. I don't fight for gain, she said finally. I fight because some things are worth protecting, even when they're not mine. Especially when they're not mine. The Empress was silent for a long moment. Then she lowered her head. I surrender, she said. The Krath Dominion accepts defeat. The war was over. In the months that followed, the galaxy changed. The Valori Confederacy welcomed humanity as its 13th member species. Treaties were signed. Territories were assigned. Former enemies became uneasy neighbors, then reluctant partners, and something that might eventually become friends. The humans did not return to cryosleep. There was nothing to return to. Earth had continued without them for 500 years, and the few humans who traveled back found a planet they did not recognize. Filled with people who saw them as strangers, so they stayed in the Andromeda sector. They built homes on empty worlds. They started families with each other and sometimes with members of other species. They opened schools and hospitals and restaurants. They argued about politics and religion and sports. They did all the things that humans had always done, and they kept protecting the people around them. Elder. Salman died 6 months after the war ended. He was 212 years old. In his final speech to the council, he said, "We released the humans because we were desperate. We feared they would destroy us. Instead, they saved us. Perhaps there is a lesson in that. Perhaps the things we fear most are sometimes the things we need most." Captain Junho and Sergeant Hannah met one last time, years after the war. Junho had become an admiral. Hannah had retired from the military and opened a small farm on a quiet planet near the sector's edge. "Do you miss it?" Junho asked. "The fighting." Hannah looked out at her fields, where strange alien crops grew in neat rows. Sometimes, she admitted, humans are good at war. We're built for it, in some ways. But we're not only built for it. She turned to face him. "We're good at everything we decide matters," she said. "War was what you needed from us. So we gave you war. But we can give you other things too. Music, art, science, love. We can build things as well as we can destroy them." She smiled. And for the first time, Junho saw no sharpness in it. Just warmth. "That's the real human secret," she said. "We don't have limits. We have choices. And we chose to care about you." Junho stayed on the farm for dinner that night. The food was strange, but delicious. The conversation was warm and easy. When he left, he felt something he had not felt in a long time. Hope. Real hope. Not for survival, but for the future. The galaxy had learned a lesson during the Krath War. When everything else failed, when all other options were exhausted, there was always one last choice. One final card to play: release the humans. But the galaxy had learned another lesson too. A better one. The humans were not just weapons. They were not just monsters or saviors or soldiers. They were people. Complicated, contradictory, capable of incredible violence and incredible tenderness. And now they were home.